The sun was a brilliant, mocking diamond in the sky, reflecting off the windows of the Grand Legacy Hotel. It should have been the most beautiful day of my life. I, Ilara Vance, stood in a gown of cascading ivory silk, my hand meant to be held by the man who was currently staring at the rooftop as if the world were ending. Perhaps for him it was. Beneath the skirts of the woman on the ledge, a dark, sinister stain had already bloomed, turning the white fabric a gruesome crimson. Her sobs were a raw, tearing sound, filled with a theatrical grief that in this moment only I knew was a lie. Her body swayed, a delicate, broken doll on the precipice. I turned my head not to look at the spectacle, but at my almost husband, Julian Thorne. His profile was sharp with a panic that felt like a physical blow. His fingers, usually so steady, were rubbing together in a frantic, unconscious rhythm, and his entire body was a tightly coiled spring of tension. In that single crystalline moment, the world tilted on its axis, and memory crashed over me like a tidal wave. I remembered the cold metal of the car, the blinding headlights, the shattering glass. I remembered the newspaper headlines, the vicious online comments, my father's still form in a hospital bed, my mother's vacant eyes. I remembered Julian and Serafina, radiant and in love at their own lavish wedding, while my world lay in ashes. I had been reborn, brought back to the very day that had been the beginning of my end. Just as Julian made to run, a desperate lunge toward his damsel in distress, I didn't think. I acted. My hand shot out, my fingers closing around his forearm with a strength that surprised us both. "Julian, where are you going?" He flinched, his gaze snapping to me, irritation flashing in his stormy gray eyes. "Can't you see someone's about to jump? I'm going to help." I tightened my grip, my nails digging into the fine wool of his suit jacket. In my previous life, after he had run off, he hadn't returned for a long time. And when he did, he was carrying Serafina Reed in his arms, her face buried in his chest, not even sparing me a glance. The ambulance had left, a silent, screaming accusation, and I had been left alone to face the smirks and whispers, to deal with the ruins of what was supposed to be our wedding. At the time, I had been shell-shocked, wanting only to hear his explanation before handling the fallout. But I never got the chance. A carefully edited video had gone viral, branding me the villain. I was the homewrecker, the other woman who had torn apart a true love, forcing the real fiancé to attempt suicide and causing her to lose her child. With a life supposedly lost, the male lead had a change of heart. The prodigal son returned to the arms of his true love, and I, the wicked mistress, lost everything. Overnight, I became the punchline of my own wedding, a national disgrace. I had begged them on my knees to tell the truth. Serafina, no longer the fragile girl on the rooftop, had tilted my chin with a mocking smile. "You think someone like you could compete with me for Julian? Try looking in a mirror. All of this is what you deserve." And Julian, standing behind her, had simply said, "You heard her. I've only ever loved Serafina. A pawn. I had been a pawn in their twisted game of love, my life and my family's lives nothing more than set dressing for their dramatic reconciliation." "Let go of me, Ilara," Julian snarled, trying to shake me off. "You know that girl on the rooftop," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Why is she calling me a homewrecker? Why is she accusing me of killing her child? Don't you think you owe me an explanation?" His eyes darted around at our gathered family and friends. He couldn't admit he knew her. Instead, he did what cowards do, he turned the blame on me. "I don't even know her," he hissed, his voice low so only I could hear. "Who knows what you've done in your past? Maybe you stole someone else's husband and now she's here for revenge. Honestly, this wedding shouldn't happen at all. The Thorne family values character. We would never marry a woman with such low morals." A disbelieving laugh bubbled in my throat. He had pursued me. He had proposed. He had used me to orchestrate this grand wedding solely to lure back Serafina, who had run off while pregnant. And now that his plan had worked, he wanted me to be the scapegoat. "If you don't know her," I said, my voice cold and clear, "then why are you so anxious? Suicide isn't a small matter. I think we should just call the police." I pulled my phone from the small purse my maid of honor, Chloe, was holding. Julian's reaction was instantaneous and violent. He slapped the phone from my hand, sending it clattering across the marble floor. His expression darkened, his voice dropping to an icy whisper. "What the hell are you doing? Are you trying to get her killed?" If anything happens to her, it's on you. Aren't you afraid? Elara, how can you be so heartless? Chloe stepped forward, her face flushed with anger, ready to defend me. I gently pulled her back, my eyes never leaving Julian's. I'm vicious, I repeated, my voice rising so the closest guests could hear. I'm standing here at my own wedding and a stranger storms in, calls me a homewrecker and a murderer, and I shouldn't call the cops? Why not? Even if I put aside her slander to prioritize saving a life, what's wrong with me calling the professionals for help? Isn't that what any sane person would do? He had no comeback. His face twisted in frustration, but instead of backing down he grabbed my wrist, his grip like a vice. I tried to break free, but he only held on tighter. I caught Chloe's eye and gave a subtle nod. She understood immediately. Slipping her own phone from her purse, she melted into the crowd. The police arrived with a swift, professional efficiency that was a stark contrast to the chaos. They began evacuating the onlookers and securing the rooftop. Order was being restored from the mess Julian and Serafina had created. I asked my cousin to take my parents home. They had been through enough. When Julian saw the uniforms, his panic escalated. And Serafina, seeing her dramatic stage being dismantled, quickly scurried down from the rooftop on her own. In the end, we all went to the police station. Julian tried to maintain the charade, to pretend he didn't know the weeping girl sitting across the room. But Serafina cried so hard, so convincingly, that his resolve shattered. Before the officer could even finish his questions, they were in each other's arms, a tragic picture of reunited lovers. I watched them, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. Then I stepped forward. "Officer," I said, my voice ringing in the sterile room. "Can I press charges against Julian Thorne for marriage fraud?" I pointed at Serafina. "And I don't know this woman, but she spread lies and slandered me in front of hundreds of people. I want to press charges against her too." Julian rushed to shield Serafina, glaring at me. "Elara, dragging everyone to the police station still isn't enough for you? You'd better watch yourself." I gave him a thin, cold smile. "Officer, as you can see, not only did he deceive me into a fake marriage, he's now threatening me in front of you." With the officer's warning, Julian finally shut up and with great reluctance confessed the truth. He and Serafina had been in love. His mother, Eleanor Thorne, disapproved, believing Serafina came from a troubled family and lacked breeding. She had even offered Serafina $20,000 to leave. Feeling insulted, Serafina had run off, pregnant and furious. Julian, to appease his mother and he admitted to try and smoke Serafina out of hiding, had started dating me. The wedding was the ultimate piece of bait. He never expected her to lose the baby while on the run, or for her to reappear in a blood-stained dress on our wedding day. Only when the official report was filed did I feel the true weight of my rebirth lift slightly. In my previous life I had no evidence, no defense against their lies. Now I had the truth on paper. It was a start. When I got home I told my parents everything. The heartbreak and rage on their faces was a painful thing to witness. My gentle, soft-spoken father used words I had never heard him say, cursing Julian for the monster he was. The nightmare of the wedding was over. But I knew with a chilling certainty that the war had just begun. The morning after the wedding, that wasn't. The silence in my apartment was a physical presence. It was broken by the sharp buzz of my new phone. A message from Julian. It wasn't an apology or an explanation. It was an invoice. Itemized with cold, corporate precision, it listed every cost associated with the wedding. The floral arrangements from Petal and Thorn, the 5-tier cake from Le Delice, the string quartet, the venue fee for the grand legacy. My share was singled out in a bold red font. My custom-designed Vera Wang gown, the hair and makeup team I'd flown in from New York, the premium open bar upgrade I'd insisted on to please his business associates. It totaled just over $950,000. A note was attached. "As per our initial agreement, these were your responsibilities. Transfer the amount to the account below. Don't delay." Our agreement had been a casual conversation where I, touched by what I thought was his generosity in handling the larger venue costs, had offered to cover the aesthetic details. I had been so eager to build a life with him, to show I wasn't just after his family's money. He had used that against me. Before the acid burn of rage could fully spread, the phone rang. Julian's name flashed on the screen. "You've seen the bill." His voice was cold, devoid of any emotion except impatience. If everything looks correct, transfer the funds. I don't have time for this. I found my voice, though it was tight. We were supposed to get married, Julian. Of course, most of the personal expenses came from my side. And after everything, you have the audacity to send me a bill? There was a rustle, and then a female voice, shrill and vicious, cut in. It was Serafina. Alara, how can you be so shameless? You spent the money yourself. Why shouldn't you pay for it? You failed to seduce Julian and now you're trying to scam him? Keep dreaming. If you dare try to skip out, I'll make you regret it. The line went dead. I stood there, my hand trembling around the phone, the sheer, unadulterated gall of them leaving me breathless. They were a perfect match in their wickedness. There was no universe in which I would pay them a single cent. I wanted to see exactly how they planned to make me regret it. The answer came that evening. Chloe called me, her voice panicked. Alara, check your messages. I sent you a link. It's bad. I opened the link. It was a video from the wedding day, posted on a popular gossip site. This time the narrative had shifted. They didn't call me a homewrecker. Now I was the heartless ice queen. The video was masterfully edited. It zoomed in on the moment I grabbed Julian's arm, my face set in determined lines that looked like cruelty in this context. It cut to Serafina on the rooftop, a tiny, tragic figure, then back to me, refusing to let go. The narrator, with a voice dripping with faux concern, spun a tale of a gold-digging socialite obsessed with the Thorn fortune. I had trapped Julian, they claimed, and when a poor, innocent girl's life was in danger, I had coldly prevented my fiancé from helping, terrified of losing my meal ticket. And now, with the wedding failed, I was attempting to extort nearly $1 million from the heartbroken groom. Their faces were carefully blurred. Mine was crystal clear. The comments were a torrent of digital poison. What a monster. She wouldn't even let him save a life. You can see the greed in her eyes. Clinging to her cash cow. $1 million? She's delusional. Hope she rots. In my first life, I had thought the viral video was a tragic accident, a consequence of the chaotic scene. It was only later, through desperate digging, that I discovered the truth. Serafina had orchestrated it all. She had hired the videographer, directed the edits, and paid to boost the video's visibility. She was the director, producer, and star of my public execution. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I would not cry. I would not panic. This time I was ready. My first call was to my cousin, Ben. Ben, I need a huge favor. Can you take Mom and Dad to the lake house? Or better yet, to that villa in Tuscany they've always talked about? Get them out of the country for a few weeks. Alara, what's going on? The news. It's everywhere. I know. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. I need them safe and away from this. Please. He agreed without hesitation. Next, I called my family's lawyer, Mr. Sterling. I forwarded him the invoice and the link to the video. I want to sue for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and fraud. And I want to send a cease and desist regarding this fraudulent invoice. I'll get the paperwork started immediately, Alara. His calm, professional voice was a balm. We'll also file a motion to preserve all their digital records. If they paid to promote that video, we'll find the trail. I assumed my preemptive legal strike would force them to lie low. I was wrong. The very next afternoon, Serafina Reed showed up outside my office building. She was still wearing the same white dress, the bloodstains now a brownish black along the hem. The moment I stepped out, she threw herself onto the pavement at my feet, sobbing so violently her whole body shook. Miss Vance. I was wrong. Please, I'm begging you, forgive me. Her voice was a theatrical wail. I never meant to ruin your wedding. But I knew Julian first. We were together first, and we were having a baby. She lifted her skirt, revealing her pale thighs. Look, my baby, he didn't even get a chance to see this world. Her voice cracked with a grief that, had I not known the truth, would have shattered me. Please, Miss Vance, if you want to blame someone, blame me. But please return the money to Julian. $1 million isn't a small amount. I'm just an ordinary person. I can't afford it. My eyes scanned the crowd. Just as I expected, several bystanders had their phones out, held a little too steadily, angled a little too perfectly. This was a performance, and I was the unwilling co-star. I tried to pull her up, but she was dead weight, clinging to the concrete. Miss Vance, she sobbed, even though I lost my baby because of you, I don't hate you. I know you only did it because you love Julian too much. So much that you chose the wrong way. I only ask that you give the money back. My child's life should be enough to repay you. And if it's not, then take mine too. I'll pay with my life, okay? She began bowing, kowtowing on the dirty sidewalk. A few older women in the crowd clicked their tongues. Young lady, have some compassion, one chided me. She's already been pushed this far. Just return the money, another joined in. Your family name is already mud. Don't make it worse. They were ganging up, their misplaced sympathy weaponized by Serafina's act. She kept her face hidden from them, but her eyes, when they met mine, were bright with triumphant anticipation. She was waiting for me to snap, to scream, to become the villain she had painted me as. But I had learned my lesson. I would not provide the footage she craved. I waved over 2 security guards from the building's lobby. Please help this young lady to her feet. She seems unwell. As they firmly pulled her up, I stepped forward. I gently took a tissue from my purse and dabbed the mostly fake tears from her cheeks, then smoothed her disheveled hair. My touch was gentle, my voice a soft, warm counterpoint to her hysterics. Miss Reed, I said loud enough for the nearby phones to pick up. Even though my wedding was ruined, I've never once blamed you. In fact, I should be thanking you. I took her hand in mine, my expression one of sincere gratitude. She stared at me bewildered. If it weren't for your brave performance on that rooftop, I continued, my voice dripping with sweet sincerity, how else would I have discovered what a two-faced liar Julian Thorne truly is? On one side he's sneaking around with you, even getting you pregnant. On the other he's proposing to me, pretending he's a devoted, single man. I should thank you for revealing the truth. I smiled, a beautiful, gentle smile that didn't reach my eyes. Serafina panicked. No. It wasn't an act. I wasn't acting. And Julian's not a player. I cut her off. As for the $1 million, that's between me and the Thorne family. It has nothing to do with you. Why burden yourself with something that isn't your responsibility? I then gasped softly, as if a terrible thought had just occurred to me. Julian wouldn't seriously stoop so low as to put all this on you, would he? He's actually trying to make you shoulder that debt. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. I didn't let her speak. Guess I was right, I sighed, shaking my head sadly. He really is a scumbag. But don't worry. I've handed everything over to my lawyer. They'll be in touch with him soon to explain how the law works. You're welcome to sit in and learn something too. Her face darkened into a mask of pure fury. The tide had turned. The onlookers, once firmly on her side, now looked confused, their certainty shaken. The show was over. I asked the guards to clear the area and even politely arranged for a car service to take the fuming Serafina home. Later, through a private investigator I'd already hired, I learned she had a screaming fit in the car, yelling at someone on the phone that the footage was unusable and they'd have to reshoot. The person on the other end, presumably the videographer, demanded payment anyway. Enraged, she smashed her phone against the window. What she didn't know was that while she was having her tantrum, I was already in my apartment, working with a discreet media contact Chloe knew. We had our own footage, shot from a second-story window. We edited it carefully, showing her dramatic collapse, my calm response, and her furious exit. We posted it online, linking it to the very hashtags they had paid to trend. I didn't spend a dime, but I enjoyed the benefits of their expensive viral campaign. I made sure the moment Serafina got a new phone, she'd see her own name on the trending list, right next to mine. This time the court of public opinion began to shift. Wait, she's thanking the other woman? This is weird. The guy sounds like a total tool. Making his mistress beg for his money? Something's not adding up. The original video felt off. The seeds of doubt were sown. The first battle in the online war was a draw, but I had held my ground. And I was just getting started. The online storm I had unleashed began to swirl in a new direction. The full, unedited clip of my encounter with Serafina, paired with the cold, hard facts of the police report I discreetly hinted at, started to fracture their narrative. The public, fickle as ever, began to dissect Julian and Serafina with the same viciousness they had once reserved for me. So the grieving mother was stable enough to run her own PR campaign? Convenient. Thorne is a coward. Throwing his mistress under the bus to pay his wedding bills? Classy. This feels like a bad telenovela. I'm starting to feel sorry for the bride. That last comment, seeing the word sorry next to my name, was a small, hard-won victory. But I felt no joy, only a cold, focused determination. They had tried to bury me under a mountain of lies. Now I would return the favor with an avalanche of truth. My peace was shattered a few nights later by a pounding on my apartment door. I peered through the peephole to see Julian, his face haggard, his usually immaculate hair disheveled. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I didn't open the door. "Go away, Julian, or I'll call building security." "Alara, please. We need to talk." His voice was raspy, stripped of its usual arrogance. "It's about Emily, about Serafina." Against my better judgment, I cracked the door, leaving the chain on. "Talk." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of genuine distress I might have once fallen for. "All of this, the things she's been doing online, it's my fault. I pushed her to this. Can you please just make a statement? Tell people it was all a misunderstanding? That we're all working it out privately? My mother's blood pressure is through the roof. The board is asking questions. I can't sleep." I stared at him, incredulous. "You want me to clean up your mess? To lie for you? We were this close to being married, Alara," he pleaded, his eyes desperate. "Doesn't that mean anything? There's a saying, a one-day marriage is still 100 days of grace. Just do this for me. Explain things to the netizens and I'll forget the million. Consider it your compensation." The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it stole my breath. Compensation. As if his betrayal and public humiliation were a simple business transaction. I let out a short, sharp laugh that had no humor in it. "Julian Thorne, I had no idea until today just how thick your skin really is." I looked him up and down with open contempt. "You need to stop dreaming in broad daylight. There is absolutely no way I am going to speak on your behalf." Seeing my resolve, his desperation turned to anger. He tried to shove the door, but the chain held. "Alara, don't be a bitch about this. I'm trying to be reasonable." "Security," I called out, my voice echoing in the hallway. The patrolling guard for our floor appeared promptly. I pointed at Julian. "This man is harassing me. Please escort him from the premises." As the guard firmly led a sputtering Julian away, I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart hammering not from fear, but from a furious, righteous energy. He couldn't sleep for a few days? His household was chaotic. In my last life, my entire family was destroyed, and all he did was smirk and say I'd had it coming. It was true. Pain only matters when it's your own. Even without my help, their situation was spiraling. And Julian's next move was truly eye-opening. That night, he went live on a popular social media platform. I watched, sipping a cup of chamomile tea as he sat in what looked like his study, the shelves lined with leather-bound books he'd probably never read. He looked into the camera, his eyes artfully red-rimmed. "I owe everyone an explanation," he began, his voice low and strained. He laid out a carefully revised version of our story. How we'd met on a blind date, how he'd been captivated by my vibrance and intelligence. How he had truly wanted to build a life with me. He choked up several times, wiping at his eyes, swearing his feelings had been real. Then came the inevitable question from the chat flashing across the screen. "But what about Serafina? She was pregnant." Julian took a deep, shuddering breath, covered his face with his hands and seemed to fight for composure. As his emotions became too overwhelming, his father, Alistair Thorne, stepped into the frame, placing a comforting hand on his son's shoulder. "That day," Alistair said, his voice grave and paternal, "Alara and Julian had a small disagreement. Julian was upset and he went out for a drink to clear his head. That woman, Serafina, took advantage of the situation. We believe she drugged him." He paused for effect. "Julian has been in pain about it ever since. We didn't dare tell Alara. He would have felt too guilty." I actually laughed out loud, a sharp, bitter sound in my quiet apartment. So that was their play. Push the entire blame onto Serafina, paint Julian as the tragically violated victim, and me as the poor, unknowing woman he'd been trying to protect. They were sacrificing their pawn to save the king. It was despicable. And it was working. The live chat was flooding with sympathy for Julian. I waited, wondering if Serafina would come forward to deny it. Her silence was deafening. Why would she allow herself to be painted as a predatory rapist? The answer came a day later in a text from Julian that made my blood run cold. Monday, 9 a.m. Civil Affairs Bureau. Bring your ID. Let's get the divorce finalized. The divorce. In the whirlwind, I had almost forgotten the most insidious trap of all. Before the wedding, pressured by his mother Eleanor, who saw me as the perfect, respectable daughter-in-law, Julian had insisted we officially register our marriage. I'd thought it romantic, a sign of his commitment. I now saw it for what it was: another layer of control, another string he could pull. In the eyes of the law, we were still married. His mother had never liked Serafina. This was their condition for accepting her. Serafina had to shoulder the entire burden of public hatred, be the villainess so Julian could emerge as the wronged hero. And she, in her twisted love or obsession, had agreed. Her silence was the price of admission into the Thorne family. So once again Julian gave in to his family's demands and Serafina gave in to Julian. On Monday I met him at the Civil Affairs Bureau. The air between us was frigid. We went through the motions, the paperwork, a stark, bureaucratic end to a relationship that had never been real. As we walked out, the bright sunlight felt like an accusation. And there she was. Serafina, waiting by the fountain, a vision in innocent white. She ran to Julian, throwing herself into his arms. "Julian, now I can finally marry you," she cried, her voice dripping with joyous tears. He wrapped his arms around her, a perfect picture of devotion. "Silly girl," he said, his voice soft. "You've always been the only one I wanted to marry. You just never believed me." Then over his shoulder Serafina shot me a look. It wasn't just a look of triumph. It was a glare of pure, unadulterated hatred, a promise of future retribution. I held her gaze for a moment, then turned and walked away without a word. I wouldn't let their pathetic performance dirty my eyes. Let them have their hollow victory. They were welcome to each other. A few days later, Chloe found me at my office, hunched over my drafting table, sketching a new design for a pendant inspired by fractured light. "Elara," she said, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "They're getting married. In 3 days. Don't you feel anything?" I didn't look up from my sketch. "They're getting married. Why would I feel anything?" She huffed in frustration. "Serafina ruined your life. Sure, it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. You saw him for the snake he is, but I still can't swallow this. What do you say we stir things up a bit on their wedding day? A little surprise." My pencil stilled. My heart gave a small, hard jolt. In my last life, the most damning accusation, the one that had haunted me until my dying day, was that I had killed Serafina's unborn child. I'd been called a murderer by strangers on the street. But I had been completely in the dark. I hadn't even known she existed before the wedding. How could her miscarriage have had anything to do with me? After being reborn, one of the first things I had done was hire a private investigator to find the truth. The results had come in just that morning, and they were far more satisfying than I could have ever imagined. I finally looked at Chloe, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. I patted her hand. "You don't need to lift a finger. Just sit back and enjoy the show." The next afternoon, I had a courier deliver a plain manila envelope to Julian's private office. Inside was not a weapon but a key. The key to the cage they were so eagerly building for themselves. That night I turned off my phone, poured a glass of wine, and finally had the first peaceful, dreamless sleep of my new life. I heard through the grapevine that the Thorne household erupted in chaos. Alistair and Eleanor were furious, their shouts echoing through the mansion. Julian at first defended Serafina with a surprising fervor, even kneeling before his parents and declaring, "I already failed her once. I lost our baby. I won't betray her again no matter what." It was then, in the face of his stubborn nobility, that his father, clutching his chest in rage, flung the file I had sent straight at Julian's face. "You fool!" Alistair had roared. "Read it." Confused, Julian picked up the scattered pages. The color drained from his face as he read the investigator's report, complete with photocopied medical records from a shady, back-alley clinic and signed statements from a certain other man Serafina had been involved with during her disappearance. The truth was simple and utterly devastating. Their child was never lost because of me or the stress of the wedding. After Serafina had run away, angry and humiliated, she had quickly found comfort in the arms of another man. A complication arose and she had miscarried. Terrified Julian would find out, she hadn't dared go to a proper hospital. And on the day of my wedding, for the sake of maximum drama, she had gone to a local butcher, bought a pouch of chicken blood and smeared it under her dress. She had then told Julian that I, Ilara, had driven her into such an emotional breakdown that I was the direct cause of her losing their baby. The foundation of their entire twisted narrative, the very cornerstone of my villainy, was a lie. A cheap, grotesque and calculated lie. I didn't know what happened between them after Julian learned the truth, and I didn't care to follow up. I was busy. I had designs to draw, a career to build. In my past life, industry veterans had praised my natural talent, saying my designs had a soul. I wouldn't waste that again. I was finalizing plans for my own jewelry studio, a brand that would belong only to me. Every second was precious. There wasn't a moment to spare for the crumbling ruins of Julian Thorne and Seraphina Reed. The trap had been sprung, and they had walked right into it. The calm I had cultivated was shattered the next morning. The moment I switched my phone on after a night of deep, untroubled sleep, it erupted in a violent symphony of rings and notifications. I ignored the unknown numbers, but one call came through persistently. A sense of grim inevitability settled over me as I answered. Ilara Vance, it was you, wasn't it? Seraphina's voice was a shrill, broken thing, scraping against my eardrums. You're trying to destroy me. I let out a weary, mocking laugh. Do you make a habit of barking at people first thing in the morning? She was too far gone in her hysteria to register the insult. Don't think I don't know. You've been investigating me. All because you're jealous. Jealous that Julian only loves me, not you. You want to ruin me. Let me tell you something, she hissed, her breath ragged. You'll never take him away from me. Over my dead body. She kept repeating the phrase, her voice spiraling into a frenzied, unhinged mantra. It was the sound of a plan unraveling, of a carefully constructed world cracking at the seams. I couldn't stomach it. I hung up and blocked the number in one fluid motion. But I had underestimated the depth of her desperation. That same afternoon, as I was trying to find solace in the quiet hum of my favorite cafe, she found me. She slid into the chair opposite mine, her presence an unwelcome chill. She was a ghost of the calculated vision she'd once presented. Her hair was a tangled mess, her complexion pale and waxy. The dark circles under her eyes were a stark contrast to my own composed, if weary, appearance. Ilara Vance, she declared, her voice trembling with a forced bravado. I'm not giving Julian up to you. No matter what tricks you use, it won't work. I sighed, placing my coffee cup down with deliberate calm. Emily, I said, using her real name to prick at her facade, don't you find it a little pathetic? You went through all that effort and yet Julian still won't let you through the door. I tilted my head, a faint, cold smile on my lips. You've clung to him for so long. Every time a woman walks past him, you go on the attack. Isn't that exhausting? Her jaw tightened. You and I are different. We are, I agreed softly. I didn't even have to try, and Julian's parents accepted me. I heard they've banned you from the house again. I wouldn't be surprised if in a few days they come begging me to take their son back. After all, I'm the best option they'll ever get. By then, whatever you try to do will be too late. She shot to her feet, slamming her palms on the table, making the china rattle. You bitch. Keep dreaming. I sighed again, the picture of weary patience. Seraphina, the one who's been dreaming all along is you. You actually think love alone is enough to keep a man like Julian Thorne? If your only weapon is emotional manipulation, then someone else is bound to steal him away sooner or later. If it's not me, it'll be someone else. She froze, my words hitting their mark with the precision of a scalpel. She stood there, stuck in a silent, seething rage as the civilized world of the cafe moved around her, oblivious to the tempest at table 7. For the next half-month, a strange quiet fell. Both Julian and Seraphina vanished from my radar and, it seemed, from the public eye. The online storm began to subside, other scandals taking its place. I immersed myself in my work, the designs for my studio flowing from my pencil with a new, fierce clarity. The pendant, fractured light, was becoming a statement piece, a beautiful thing born from brokenness. The piece was an illusion. The next time I heard their names, it was from a society columnist. Julian Thorne and Seraphina Reed were to be married in 3 days' time. The announcement was rushed, almost frantic. It felt less like a celebration and more like a last, desperate gambit. On the day of their wedding, the sun was a blazing, indifferent orb in a clear blue sky. I did not attend. Chloe, my loyal knight, went early to the venue, her phone charged and ready. Her mission was simple: to livestream the spectacle for me. My own mission was of a more legal nature. I gathered the documents my lawyer, Mr. Sterling, had prepared and headed straight to the police station. The grounds for my case were solid. Julian and I were still legally married. Our divorce, filed just days before, was still within the mandatory cooling-off period. It was not yet finalized. By attempting to marry Serafina, Julian was committing the crime of bigamy, and she was a willing accomplice. According to Chloe's frantic whispered commentary from her live stream, the wedding was an even more chaotic farce than mine had been. They were on a flower-strewn stage, sharing saccharine stories of their epic love, of trials overcome and destiny fulfilled. Julian was painting himself as a hero who had fought for his true love against all odds. Serafina was clinging to his arm, her smile brittle but triumphant. It was at this peak of their performance, as the officiant asked if anyone present knew of any reason these two should not be lawfully joined, that the police officers I had sent quietly walked down the aisle. The live stream footage was shaky but crystal clear. The look of utter shock on Julian's face, the dawning horror on Serafina's. The officer spoke to them in low, firm tones. Julian stood frozen, a statue of humiliation. But Serafina erupted. Her eyes went wild. She glared at Julian, her voice rising to a shriek that the phone's microphone picked up perfectly. Do something, Julian. Beg your parents. Pay them off. Do whatever it takes. This wedding is happening. Julian, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped in defeat, finally looked at her. After a long, painful pause, he only said 2 words. Forget it. That was the match that lit the powder keg. Serafina went completely, spectacularly hysterical. She was no longer a tragic heroine, she was a feral creature. She scratched at his face, her manicured nails drawing blood. She beat her fists against his chest, screaming, "You think anyone else would want you? Who the hell would still marry you? Forget it. You think it's that simple? If this wedding doesn't happen, you know exactly what's coming." She trashed the altar, flipping over the floral arrangements, tearing down the gauzy drapes, sending glasses of champagne flying until several guests and security had to physically restrain her and drag her, kicking and screaming, from the venue. The live stream cut off amid the chaos. I handed the finalized complaint for bigamy over to the stoic officer at the desk. The ensuing legal mess would tie them up for months. As I walked out of the police station, the bright sunlight felt different. It felt clean. I went back to my studio and lost myself in my work, adding the final intricate details to the fractured light pendant. It was a masterpiece of broken lines and captured illumination. My cousin Ben called to say my parents were returning from Tuscany, tanned, relaxed, and eager to see me. I promised I would spend a quiet, uninterrupted week with them, making up for the lost time and regrets of my past life. But first, the Mitchell mess needed its final chapter. Their household, according to Mr. Sterling's sources, was in total disarray. Alistair and Eleanor were scrambling, calling in a lifetime's worth of favors, hiring an army of high-priced lawyers to keep their son and his would-be bride out of jail. They managed to secure their temporary release, a testament to the power of their wealth and influence. After their release, Serafina, humiliated and enraged, insisted on holding another wedding, a bigger one, to show the world they had won. This time Julian flatly refused. He had been publicly arrested at his own wedding. His pride, the one thing he truly cherished, had been shredded. His father, his hair noticeably grayer, his eyes permanently bloodshot, confronted him. "Julian," Alistair's voice was trembling, aged a decade in a matter of weeks. "Your mother and I have supported you in everything. But ever since you got involved with that Serafina Reed, this family has never known a moment's peace. We've learned our lesson. You need to end it with her. There are plenty of good women out there. If you insist on being with her, then you're no son of mine." Julian's eyes turned red, but a stubborn, foolish loyalty, or perhaps just sheer spite, held him. He dropped to his knees with a loud thud. "Mom, Dad, I have my reasons. I have to marry her." It was the final straw. For the first time, Julian's father looked at his son with true heartbroken disappointment. He had Julian locked inside the family estate, cutting off all his communication with the outside world. Serafina was strictly, physically forbidden from seeing him. For 3 days she searched for him. He went to his clubs, his office, his favorite restaurants. She even showed up at my parents' new high-security building, but was turned away at the gate. She found nothing. On the fourth day, angry, humiliated, and utterly unhinged, Serafina played her final catastrophic card. She uploaded a video online. It was shaky, dark, and damning. In a tearful, rage-filled monologue, she revealed that after our meeting at the cafe, in a desperate attempt to tie Julian to her forever, she had drugged him during a private dinner. She had then, in a calculated move to secure his dependency, delivered him to the hotel room of a powerful older business associate of his father's, a man known for his particular tastes. She had recorded the entire sordid setup. Her intention had been to use the footage to blackmail Julian into marriage. But what she didn't expect, she screamed at the camera, was that Julian, even after seeing the video, still hesitated. He was trying to find a way to calm her down without giving in. So, in a fit of ultimate spite, she released it to the world. I saw my opportunity. I added fuel to the fire, using a network of online contacts to ensure the video gained maximum visibility, pulling away the digital veil I had kept over their affairs. I knew Julian too well. His pride was his temple, and Serafina had just burned it to the ground. The fallout was immediate and nuclear. The video was too vile, too explicit in its implications, for even the Thorns' money to silence. The man in the video, a prominent figure, threatened lawsuits of his own. Julian was not just a cuckold. He was a victim and a pawn in the most humiliating way imaginable. I didn't wait for the final act. I had a new home, a new studio, and a life to build. Through a connection, I was introduced to Isabella Rossi, a legendary reclusive figure in the world of jewelry design. I showed her my portfolio, my hands trembling slightly. She looked at the fractured light design for a long, silent time. "This," she said, her accent thick, her eyes sharp and intelligent, "has a voice. It is angry and it is beautiful. I can teach you to make it sing. But you must come to Milan. I do not teach via video call." It was the chance of a lifetime. The night before I left, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but a cold intuition made me press the button. There was silence on the other end for a long time, filled only with the sound of ragged breathing. Just as I was about to hang up, I heard his voice. It was hollow, broken, a ghost of the confident baritone I once knew. "Ilara," Julian croaked. "If we had actually gotten married back then, do you think none of this would have happened? Serafina, she ruined our wedding. She ruined me. I regret it." I let out a soft, scornful laugh that echoed in the quiet of my apartment. "There is no what if, Julian. We were never going to make it." And I hung up. He would never understand. After everything I had lived through in my past life, even without Serafina Reed, there was no version of reality where I would have chosen him in this one. The void he was staring into was of his own making. My path finally was leading elsewhere. To Milan. To Isabella Rossi. To a future I was designing for myself. Milan was a baptism of fire and light. Isabella Rossi's studio was a chaotic symphony of creativity, a world away from the sterile order of my old life. She was a demanding, brilliant taskmaster, her critiques as sharp as her gravers. Under her tutelage, the anger and pain that had fueled my fractured light design were honed, refined, and transformed into something powerful and precise. I learned to channel the chaos into my art, to make the metal and gems speak of resilience, not just ruin. For 2 months I lived and breathed design. I spoke to my parents daily, their voices a steady, loving anchor. Chloe's updates were my only tether to the world I'd left behind, and I kept them brief. I was healing not just from Julian and Serafina, but from the ghost of the woman I had been, the one who believed in fairy tales and trusted too easily. The day I returned, Chloe met me at the airport. The moment she saw me, her face, usually so animated, was pale and drawn. She didn't hug me. She just blurted it out, the words stark and final. "Serafina is dead." The noise of the terminal seemed to recede, replaced by a high-pitched hum in my ears. "What?" "After you left, Julian was finally released on bail. The scandal from the video was immense. His family was trying to have him committed to some private Swiss clinic to get him away from everything. But he snapped. He found Serafina hiding in some grimy short-term rental. He stabbed her. Over a dozen times. She died right there." Chloe's voice dropped to a whisper. "He was the one who called the police. He just sat there on the curb, covered in it, and waited for them to arrive. I leaned against a cool pillar, the world tilting. I had wanted revenge. I had wanted them to pay. But this was a horror beyond any design. This was the twisted, bloody end of the melodrama they had started on that rooftop. The thorns, Chloe continued, her words tumbling out. They tried everything. Money, lawyers, everything. But with the video, the bigamy charge, and now this, there was nothing they could do. The trial was swift. He's gone, Lara. Life with no chance of parole for 25 years. I saw him then not as the monster he had become, but as the broken man on the phone, whispering his regrets into the void. He had gotten his wish. There was no what if anymore. There was only the crushing finality of a prison cell and the ghost of a woman he had both loved and destroyed. The victory I had imagined tasted like ashes. I threw myself into my work with a ferocity that frightened even me. My studio, Kintsugi, was set to open in 3 months. The name was Japanese, meaning to repair with gold, the art of mending broken pottery by highlighting the fractures with precious metal, making the object more beautiful for having been broken. It was my manifesto. The grand opening was a testament to the life I was rebuilding. The space was filled with light, my designs displayed on velvet stands, each piece a story of fracture and repair. The fractured light pendant was the centerpiece, a constellation of shattered diamond shards held in a web of white gold, capturing and refracting the light in a dazzling, defiant display. Everyone who had stood by me was there. My parents, their eyes shining with pride, their hands clasped tightly together. Chloe, beaming, orchestrating the event like a proud general. My cousin Ben, Mr. Sterling, even a few industry contacts who had seen my work under Isabella and were curious. They had witnessed my public humiliation, my collapse. Now they witnessed my resurrection. A reporter from a prestigious design magazine circled the fractured light piece. "It's stunning," she said. "What was the inspiration?" I looked at the glittering, broken lines. It was inspired by the idea that our deepest cracks can become the places where the light enters us most powerfully, I said, my voice clear and steady. That we are not defined by what shatters us, but by how we put ourselves back together. She nodded, scribbling in her notebook. Maybe my brand would become a household name. Maybe it wouldn't. But it didn't matter. I was using my designs to tell the world the only thing that truly mattered. We are not cannon fodder in someone else's story. We are not the evil supporting characters. We are the authors of our own lives, and we can write our own endings. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the champagne flutes were being cleared away, I stood alone in the center of my studio. The silence was no longer empty. It was full of potential. The nightmare was over. Julian and Seraphina's twisted love story had consumed them both, leaving only echoes and court transcripts. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number, but I had a feeling I knew who it was. Saw the feature on Kintsugi online. The work is remarkable. You have surpassed even my expectations. The world is ready for your voice. Isabella. A slow, genuine smile spread across my face, the first that felt unburdened by the past. I looked around at my studio, at the beautiful broken things I had made whole again. The ashes had settled. On the anvil of my own wool I had forged something new, something strong, something truly my own. The story of the girl on the rooftop was closed. The story of Alara Vance, designer, was just beginning. The success of Kintsugi was a quiet, steady burn, not a flashy explosion. The feature in the design magazine brought a wave of discerning clients, women who saw more than just jewelry in my pieces. They saw resilience. They would come into the studio, their eyes lingering on the fractured light pendant, and I would see a flicker of recognition, a shared understanding of survival. My work was finding its audience, and the studio became a sanctuary of creation and calm. It was in this newfound peace that I received an invitation that sent a jolt of cold surprise through me. The invitation was for the annual Thorn Foundation Gala, a glittering event I had attended with Julian in what felt like a past life. It was embossed, formal, and addressed solely to me. The note inside, written in a precise, elegant hand, was from Eleanor Thorne. "Lara, I would be honored if you would attend as my personal guest. There is much I feel we should discuss." "Eleanor." Chloe was apoplectic. "You're not going. Lara, have you lost your mind? That woman is a gorgon. This is a trap." "She lost her son to a life sentence, Chloe," I said, my voice softer than I expected. Her world has collapsed in a way even I can't comprehend. What trap could she possibly set for me now? Guilt? Public humiliation? A final dramatic curse from the House of Thorn, she retorted, waving her hands dramatically. But curiosity, that dangerous and persistent creature, had its claws in me. Eleanor had been the architect of so much behind the scenes, the one who had disapproved of Seraphina and championed me as the suitable bride. What did she want to discuss? I decided to go. The night of the gala, I dressed not as the jilted bride, nor as the vengeful ex, but as Elara Vance, founder of Kintsugi. I wore a simple columnar gown of deep emerald green, and from my neck hung my own creation, a new piece I called the Unyielding Vine, a cascade of platinum and peridots that twisted and turned but never broke. The ballroom was a sea of familiar faces, all of whom had witnessed my downfall. A hush fell as I entered on Eleanor's arm. She was thinner, her elegance now brittle, but her head was held high. She guided me through the crowd, her grip firm on my elbow, a silent command to those who would dare to stare. We found a relatively quiet alcove. She turned to me, her eyes the same stormy gray as Julian's, searching my face. "You look well, Elara," she began, her voice low. "Your studio. It seems to be a success." "Thank you, Eleanor." "It is." A long, heavy silence stretched between us, filled with the ghost of her son and the woman he killed. "I owe you an apology," she said finally, the words seeming to cost her a great deal. "A profound one. I saw in you what I wanted for Julian. Stability. Plus, a solid foundation for the Thorn legacy. I was so blinded by my own ambitions for him, my own distaste for that creature, that I never stopped to see the flaw in the cornerstone. The weakness in my own son." I said nothing. I just let her speak, let the words she had probably rehearsed for weeks tumble out. "I pushed him toward you," she continued, her gaze distant. "I pressured him into the marriage certificate. I thought I could mold him, shape him into the man he was supposed to be by giving him the right wife. But all I did was apply pressure to a crack that was already there. And when it finally shattered, it destroyed everything in its path." She looked at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You were collateral damage in a war I started with my son. For that I am truly sorry." It was not the villainous monologue Chloe had imagined. It was the confession of a broken, proud woman who had finally seen the limits of her own control. The anger I had carried for her manipulations, softened into a complex, weary pity. "Thank you for the apology, Eleanor," I said quietly. "I accept it." She nodded, a single sharp movement as if closing a ledger. "There is one more thing." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small velvet box. This was my mother's. It was always meant for Julian's wife. "Given the circumstances, I would like you to have it. Not as a daughter-in-law, but as a woman I wronged, and who conducted herself with a grace my family did not deserve." She pressed the box into my hand. Before I could refuse, she turned and melted back into the crowd, the queen returning to her fractured court. Later, alone in my apartment, I opened the box. Inside was a breathtaking Art Deco ring, a central sapphire surrounded by baguette diamonds. It was cold and beautiful, a relic from a dynasty that was now synonymous with scandal and ruin. I didn't know what to do with it. It felt tainted, a prize from a battle I never wanted to fight. I put it in my safe, out of sight. The gala had been a final, strange coda to the Thorn chapter of my life. I thought it was the last echo. I was wrong. A week later, a man walked into my studio. He was tall, with a quiet presence that filled the space without demanding it. He had kind eyes and an easy smile, and he spent a long time looking at the unyielding vine piece in the display case. "This is extraordinary," he said, his voice a warm baritone. "It feels stubbornly hopeful." I found myself smiling. That's exactly what I was going for. His name was Daniel, he told me. He was a history professor at the university. We talked for almost an hour, not about my past or his, but about art, about the resilience of ancient civilizations, about the beauty of things that endure. He bought a pair of small hammered silver earrings, a simple piece, but his appreciation for the craft felt genuine. After he left, Chloe, who had been pretending to organize paperwork in the back, pounced. "Oh my God. He was cute. And he didn't seem to have a single clue who you are." I laughed, a real, unforced laugh. "He was just a customer, Chloe." But he came back the following week, this time with a book on Etruscan metalworking techniques he thought I might find interesting. We went for coffee. It was easy. It was normal. And in the quiet, pleasant rhythm of getting to know someone new, I felt a shadow I had grown accustomed to finally begin to recede. Daniel was a glimpse of a future unhaunted by the past. He represented a world where I was not that woman from the Thorn scandal, but simply Elara, the jeweler. It was terrifying and exhilarating. One evening as we were walking through a park, he gently took my hand. His touch was warm, solid. There was no manipulation in it, no hidden agenda, just a simple human connection. I didn't pull away. I let my fingers curl around his, feeling the ghost of an old, cold grip on my wrist finally loosen its hold. The spotlight of notoriety had faded, and in the gentle, ordinary shadow of this new beginning, I allowed myself for the first time to believe that my life could truly be my own. The world with Daniel in it was softer at the edges. Our relationship was a slow, gentle burn, a stark contrast to the inferno that had characterized my past. He was patient, allowing me to set the pace, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. He knew the broad strokes of my history. It was impossible to avoid, given the very public nature of the Thorns' downfall. But he never asked for the gory details. He seemed content to know me as I was now. Elara, the artist, the woman who loved strong coffee and terrible science fiction movies. One Saturday he helped me reorganize my studio storage. As I was shifting a box of old sketchbooks, the small velvet box from Eleanor Thorne tumbled out and fell to the floor, springing open. The Art Deco sapphire ring glittered against the dark wood. Daniel picked it up carefully. "This is stunning," he said, his historian's eye appreciating the craftsmanship. "The setting is classic late 1920s. A family piece. A complex knot tightened in my chest. In a way," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "It was from Julian's mother." He didn't flinch or pull away. He simply nodded, closing the box and handing it back to me. "It carries a heavy weight, doesn't it?" His understanding was a quiet balm. But his question lingered long after he'd gone. A heavy weight. That's exactly what it was. A beautiful, cold, and burdensome artifact from a sunken ship. I had kept it out of a confused sense of obligation, a twisted trophy from a war I'd never wanted to fight. But seeing it through Daniel's eyes, I knew I couldn't keep it locked away. It was a chain to a past I was finally, truly moving beyond. The solution came to me a few days later. I contacted Mr. Sterling. "I want to liquidate the ring," I told him. "And I want the entire sum, every penny, to be anonymously donated to the New Dawn Women's Shelter." It was a charity that helped women escape abusive relationships, rebuild their lives, and learn new skills. The poetic justice was perfect. The Thorns' blood money transformed into a lifeline for women like the one I might have become. The moment the transfer was confirmed, a physical weight lifted from my shoulders. It was the final act of letting go. I was no longer the victim, the avenger, or the inheritor of a toxic legacy. I was free. This sense of liberation bled into my work. My new collection, Unbound, was my most powerful yet. The pieces were fluid and open, featuring motifs of breaking chains and unfurling wings. The centerpiece was a necklace called Free Fall, a breathtaking cascade of aquamarines and moonstones that looked like a waterfall frozen in midair, representing the terrifying and beautiful leap into the unknown. The night before the Unbound launch, Daniel took me out to a small, quiet restaurant. Over dessert, he reached into his pocket and my breath hitched for an irrational second. But he didn't pull out a ring. He placed a small, lumpy, handmade ceramic star on the table. "I know it's not a kintsugi original," he said, a faint blush on his cheeks. "My niece made it in her pottery class. She calls it a wishing star." I told her I knew the perfect person to give it to, someone who knows how to make beautiful things out of pieces. Tears pricked my eyes, not of sadness but of overwhelming, simple joy. It was the most perfect gift I had ever received. It held no history, no pain, no price tag. It was just a token of affection, pure and uncomplicated. The Unbound launch was a triumph. The collection was met with critical acclaim and commercial success. I stood before the crowd, Daniel's hand a warm, steady presence at the small of my back, and spoke about the courage it takes to release the past and embrace a future of your own design. I felt for the first time that my public persona and my private self were finally in alignment. A few weeks later, a letter arrived at my studio. It was on plain, cheap stationery with a prison return address. My heart stalled. It was from Julian. For a long time I left it unopened on my desk, a stark white rectangle of a past I had sealed shut. Curiosity once again warred with self-preservation. Finally, with Daniel sitting silently beside me, his presence a shield, I slit the envelope. Lara, I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I know that's a currency I spent long ago. I'm writing because you are the only person left who knew me before I became. My mother writes, but she writes to the son she wished I was. My father does not write at all. Prison is a place of brutal honesty. There are no thorns here, no social masks. There is just me, alone with the consequences of my choices. I have a lot of time to think. I think about Serafina and the sickness that was our love. I think about my parents and the weight of a name I was too weak to carry. And I think about you. You were the only real thing in that entire fabricated life. And my greatest sin was not using you but failing to see your worth. I was so consumed by my own drama, my own petty rebellions and obsessions, that I treated a diamond like glass. I heard about your studio. Kintsugi. I looked it up. The irony is not lost on me. You took what I helped break and made it more beautiful. I'm glad for you. Truly. This is the last you will hear from me. I just needed you to know that in this concrete box, I have finally found a shred of the man you once thought I could be. I am sorry it came too late for everyone, especially for Serafina. I hope your life is full of light. Julian. I folded the letter, my hands steady. There was no rage, no satisfaction, just a profound oceanic sadness for all of it. For the lives wasted, the love corrupted, the potential squandered. Are you okay? Daniel asked softly. I looked at him, at his kind, concerned face, and then around my sunlit studio at the beautiful, unbound creations that were my life's work. I thought of my parents, of Chloe, of the future that was now mine to shape. Yes, I said, and I meant it. I stood up, walked to the fireplace, and without ceremony, dropped Julian's letter onto the cold grate. I struck a match and watched as the flames consumed his words, turning his apology and his regret into smoke and ash. It was not an act of vengeance. It was an act of release. The past was truly past. Its power over me was gone. The chapter was not just closed. It was burned away, leaving nothing but fertile ground for whatever was to come next. A year unfolded in a tapestry of peaceful, vibrant threads. Kintsugi was not just a success. It became an institution. My unbound collection was acquired by a major museum for their contemporary design wing, a validation that left me breathless. The girl who had been publicly shamed was now being studied for her artistic merit. The narrative had been rewritten by my own hands. Daniel was a constant, steady presence. We traveled to Greece, where he gave lectures on classical history and I sketched the sun-bleached ruins, finding inspiration in structures that had endured millennia. We bickered affectionately over the best way to make pasta sauce and adopted a scruffy rescue dog we named Hector. It was a life built not on drama but on small, cumulative joys. It was real. The final piece of my old life fell into place on a crisp autumn morning. I was meeting my mother for lunch. As I waited for her outside the restaurant, a harried-looking woman with a stroller struggled to open the door. I jumped up and held it for her. "Thank you so much," she said, her face flushed. As she passed, she did a double take. Her eyes widened in recognition, but it wasn't the morbid curiosity I was used to. It was something softer. "You're Alara Vance, aren't you?" she asked. "From Kintsugi." "I am," I said, bracing myself. She gestured to the simple silver, unyielding vine bracelet on her wrist, one of my more affordable pieces. "I bought this after my divorce. It felt like a secret message to myself that I was going to be okay." She looked at me, her eyes sincere. "Thank you. Your story, your work. It gave me hope when I needed it." The words landed not as a burden but as a gift. My past, which I had worked so hard to compartmentalize and overcome, had been transmuted. It was no longer just my private pain. It had become a source of strength for someone else. The cracks in my life had not just been mended with gold for my own sake. They were now reflecting light onto the path of others. My mother arrived and the woman smiled and moved on. Over lunch I told my mom what had happened. She reached across the table and took my hand, her eyes shining. "I always knew you were meant for more than that gilded cage, my love," she said. "Look at you now. You're not just surviving. You're building a foundation." Her words resonated. A foundation. That's what I had now. Not a legacy built on a family name or a marriage certificate, but one built on integrity, on art, on the choice to be kind even when I had every reason to be cruel. That evening I was in my studio working on a new design. It was a ring unlike anything I had made before. It was bold and geometric yet fluid, with channels of gold weaving through a central raw diamond. It spoke of structure and freedom, history and the future. It was, I realized, for me. Daniel found me there, covered in a fine dust of gold filings, utterly absorbed. "It's beautiful," he said, leaning against the doorway. "What's it called?" I looked up at him, at the man who had never tried to fix me, but had always stood by me as I fixed myself. I thought of the foundation I had built, brick by painful brick. I thought of the future, wide open and full of promise. "It doesn't have a name yet," I said, a slow, certain smile spreading across my face. "But I think it's a promise." He didn't say anything. He just walked over, took my dusty hands in his and kissed me. And in that kiss there were no ghosts, no shadows of the past. There was only the solid, unwavering present, and the brilliant, boundless future we would build together. The story of the rooftop, of Julian and Serafina, of betrayal and revenge, was finally, completely over. It was a closed book on a shelf in a distant library. My life was no longer a reaction to them. It was my own creation, my own design, and I was finally, joyously free to wear it. The end.